The CEO pointed toward the glass doors and ordered the young intern to leave the building before the end of the minute. The entire executive floor went silent as the young man stood there holding a cardboard box filled with the few belongings he had brought to work that morning. His phone was still pressed against his ear, and his face had gone pale, not because he had been fired, but because he knew the call he had just received could change everything inside the company. What the CEO didn't know was that the quiet intern he had just humiliated wasn't an ordinary college student looking for experience. He was the one person whose opinion could determine the future of the entire corporation. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and never judging someone by their appearance or position, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this story, leave a comment, and subscribe to Bright Heart for more emotional stories that remind us that one small act of kindness can change a life. Ethan had been working as an unpaid intern at Whitmore Global for only 3 weeks. He arrived every morning before most employees, dressed in the same simple cream shirt and inexpensive trousers, carrying a worn backpack that had clearly seen better days. He didn't have a flashy watch, a luxury car, or the confidence that came from knowing powerful people. Most employees barely noticed him. To them, he was simply the young intern who made copies, organized documents, carried files between departments, and quietly cleaned up after meetings. But Ethan never complained. He treated every small task as though it mattered because, to him, it did. He had spent years believing that dignity wasn't determined by the job a person performed, but by the way they performed it. The CEO, Richard Whitmore, had built the company from nothing and was known for being brilliant, demanding, and almost impossible to impress. At 62, Richard had become accustomed to people standing when he entered a room, executives carefully choosing their words around him, and employees doing everything possible to avoid disappointing him. Success had made him powerful, but somewhere along the way, it had also made him impatient. He could recognize a $1 million idea from across a conference room, but he had become terrible at recognizing the quiet struggles of ordinary people. One Monday morning, a major presentation was scheduled with several investors. Ethan had spent the previous weekend helping an exhausted assistant organize documents for the meeting. While checking the files, he noticed a serious mistake in one of the financial projections. A number had been copied incorrectly, making the company's projected losses appear much smaller than they really were. Ethan immediately informed the assistant, who promised to fix it. But on the morning of the presentation, the mistake was still there. When Ethan tried to warn the executive team, nobody wanted to listen. He was told that the meeting was too important and that he should stay out of matters above his position. Still, Ethan couldn't ignore what he had seen. When the presentation began, the investors started asking questions. Richard proudly presented the numbers, unaware that one of the charts contained the same dangerous error Ethan had noticed. Ethan stood outside the conference room, watching the presentation through the glass wall, his stomach tightening with every passing minute. Finally, unable to remain silent, Ethan stepped into the room and interrupted the presentation. Every face turned toward him. He calmly explained the error and pointed to the supporting document. The room fell completely silent. One of the investors checked the original figures on his tablet and immediately confirmed that Ethan was right. The correction revealed that the company faced a financial problem far more serious than anyone had realized. Richard's face hardened. He wasn't grateful. He was embarrassed. In his mind, the intern had challenged him in front of powerful investors and made him look unprepared. The meeting was postponed, and as soon as the investors left, Richard summoned Ethan to his office. The young intern tried to explain that he had only stepped in because he believed the company could suffer if the mistake remained unnoticed. But Richard didn't want an explanation. His anger had already made the decision for him. He accused Ethan of overstepping his authority, embarrassing senior management, and creating unnecessary confusion. Then, without asking where Ethan came from, why he needed the internship, or what had motivated him to speak up, Richard fired him. Ethan stood quietly as the words settled over him. He had expected the internship to be difficult, but he hadn't expected to lose it because he had tried to protect the company. He packed his belongings into a cardboard box while several employees watched from their desks. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked away. Ethan placed the small plant he had kept beside his desk into the box, along with a notebook, a family photograph, and a pair of headphones. As he walked toward the elevator, his phone rang. Ethan stopped. The caller's name on the screen was Daniel Whitmore. Richard's father. Daniel was the founder of Whitmore Global, though he had stepped away from the company years earlier. Very few younger employees even knew Ethan had ever met him. But Ethan had met Daniel months before, long before he became an intern. Daniel had collapsed outside a small train station one rainy evening. People walked past him, assuming he was simply an elderly man who needed help. Ethan had stopped, called emergency services, stayed beside him in the rain, and refused to leave until Daniel's family arrived. During those difficult hours, Daniel had discovered that Ethan was studying business but could barely afford his education. He offered to help, but Ethan politely refused to accept money. Instead, he asked for one opportunity to prove himself. Daniel had told him to contact Whitmore Global when the time was right. Ethan never expected Daniel to remember him. But Daniel had. The call lasted less than a minute, and when Ethan lowered the phone, his expression had changed. He turned around and walked back toward the executive floor. Richard was still in his office, furious and exhausted, when his father's name appeared on his phone. He answered reluctantly. Within seconds, the color drained from his face. Daniel had already heard what happened. He told Richard that the young man he had just fired was not merely an intern. Daniel had personally selected Ethan to participate in a confidential leadership evaluation program. He had been observing Ethan's work, his decisions, and his character without revealing his connection to the company. Daniel wanted to know whether the next generation of leaders could recognize problems, protect people, and make ethical decisions when nobody was watching. Ethan had passed every test. Richard had failed one. The realization hit Richard harder than any financial report. His father explained that the young intern had discovered the accounting error before the company's own executives did. Instead of staying silent to protect his position, Ethan had risked his internship to protect the company. And when he had been humiliated and fired, he hadn't shouted, threatened anyone, or demanded revenge. He had simply picked up his box and walked away. Richard looked through the glass wall toward the elevator. Ethan was still there. For the first time that morning, Richard saw him differently. He didn't see an intern. He saw someone with courage. Richard walked out of his office and approached Ethan. The entire floor watched as the CEO stood in front of the young man he had just fired. Richard apologized, not as a powerful CEO protecting his reputation, but as a man admitting that he had judged someone without taking the time to understand him. Ethan listened quietly. He didn't immediately forgive him. He explained that being poor didn't mean being incapable, being young didn't mean being foolish, and having a low position didn't mean having nothing valuable to contribute. Richard realized that those words were exactly what his company had forgotten. Instead of simply offering Ethan his internship back, Richard offered him something greater, a permanent position working directly with the company's innovation and ethics team. But Ethan asked for one condition. He wanted the company to create a program giving opportunities to talented young people who couldn't afford prestigious internships. Richard agreed. Months later, Ethan's name appeared on the company's leadership board. The financial crisis was contained, the accounting system was rebuilt, and the internship program became one of the company's most successful initiatives. Ethan never forgot the day he had walked out carrying that cardboard box. He kept the box in his office as a reminder that sometimes the hardest moments in life are not endings. They are unexpected doors. Richard also changed. He began eating lunch with junior employees, asking assistants for their opinions, and listening before judging. He discovered that leadership wasn't about making everyone afraid of disappointing you. It was about creating an environment where people felt safe enough to tell you the truth. And Ethan's story became a quiet lesson throughout the company: never judge someone's worth by the position written on their name badge. The person standing quietly in the corner may be carrying more courage, wisdom, and character than the people sitting at the most powerful table. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to Bright Heart. Your support helps us continue sharing stories about kindness, courage, and the unexpected ways life can change when someone chooses to do the right thing. And before the story ends, I want you to leave a special comment: I believe in second chances. Write those words if you believe that one mistake should not define a person, and that kindness can reveal the value others fail to see. Because sometimes, the person we are quickest to dismiss is the person who may one day teach us the most important lesson of our lives.